This is an announcement from Paul Haney.
Pressurization cycle. At last reading, the pressure in the cabin had built up to 3.13. They will continue to build now until something over 5 pounds. Stafford just noted they're up to 4 pounds. During the ingress procedure, Cernan reported that his visor again became completely fogged. We have no sound explanation for this. A guess or two coming from one of our staff support rooms in the back is perhaps that the suit did not take enough moisture out in view of all of Cernan's activities. Perhaps the suit failed to take away enough of the moisture, which is one guess at what could cause the fogging. Stafford gave a quick summary on the EVA exercise by simply saying, I think we've learned a lot. We have this conversation. We'll play it for you now.
RKV has acquisition. RKV. Temperature's up to about 2 psi.
Pretty poor transmission coming there from the Rosenau Victor out in the Atlantic as the spacecraft whirls around now, sealed again, the pressure building up, building very rapidly, and undoubtedly by this time, since those transmissions are delayed 15 seconds to a minute, the pressurization has been completed, and the astronauts can depressurize the spacesuits. At that time, Cernan can lift his visor, and he will have full visibility again without that fog visor problem. Presumably, they will have worked it out when he needs the visor down again, or prefers to have it down just for a double safety in 24 hours from now when they return to Earth. CBS News coverage of the Gemini 9 mission will continue in a moment. Well, for a quick recap now of this morning's exciting activities, as Eugene Cernan, 32-year-old lieutenant commander, father of one, former test pilot, made man's third walk in space and the longest by far yet. He stepped out of that Gemini 9 spacecraft over Hawaii, between Hawaii and the United States at 11:05 Eastern Daylight Time, and on that 25-foot umbilical cord which connected him with the spacecraft environment control system, that is the oxygen and the communications line back to Tom Stafford, he floated out, no maneuvering unit of any kind, but just on the end of the umbilical, floating free, some 25 feet from the spacecraft. He tried the dynamics of the tether, that is, when he pulled on it, did the spacecraft move, did he move, and that sort of thing. They got a lot of good data there. He worked in space. He recovered an S-12 micrometeorite experiment that was finding out just how much impact and how many micrometeorites there are 185 miles high where all of this took place. He fixed a camera that would take pictures of his spacewalk. He went forward and placed a mirror on the forward part of the spacecraft so that Stafford could see him when he went to the back of the spacecraft. And then as the night approached after the first dayside pass, he went to the back of the spacecraft and got into the adapter section, that 10-foot in diameter section at the rear of the spacecraft, there to don this $1 million astronaut maneuvering unit, which would have made him, in effect, an independent spacecraft flying alongside of the spacecraft he had left, attached only by a 125-foot nylon line. But there was trouble with the AMU. It turned out to be 4 to 5 times as difficult for him to get the arms distended. The communications in the AMU unit were very seriously garbled. He couldn't have, Stafford said it sounded like a loud gargle. And then there was the prime problem, and maybe one of the problems in the difficulty getting the arm extended, was that Cernan's visor fogged up, like sitting in your automobile when all of the windshields fog up. Well, that's what he had with that visor and could not see. In view of all that, they canceled the mission with the astronaut maneuvering unit, and Cernan returned to the spacecraft. He was locked in there some 15 minutes ago after a 2-hour spacewalk instead of the 2.5-hour spacewalk. Disappointment for the mission Gemini 9, but at least they have accomplished a great deal. Nelson Benton down at Mission Control in Houston can perhaps tell us what the remaining plans are for the next 24 hours of Gemini 9. Nelson?
Walter, we have no indication as yet that the flight will be brought down early. The flight plan to just normal experiments after today's EVA activity. We might note that the AMU, as NASA is currently planning, is planned for use again on the flight of Gemini 12. On flight of Gemini 10, the next one coming up, the backpack that Dave Scott never got to use on the 8th flight is planned to be used. We might speculate that things may be revised and AMU may get another chance on the next flight. Waller?
CBS News coverage of the Gemini 9 mission will continue in a moment. Well, back here at our CBS News Space Center at the McDonnell Aircraft Plant where they build these Gemini spacecraft in St. Louis, we have been reporting this morning on this exciting 2-hour spacewalk of Eugene Cernan's. The communications were quite bad during most of that flight. What you were hearing was the interception of the communication between Cernan outside the spacecraft and command pilot Tom Stafford inside the spacecraft, as picked up by the various tracking stations around the world, relayed by the tracking network to Houston, and then relayed to us. And apparently Houston was able to make out a little bit more of that conversation than we who were listening in could. And we've got, though, a record from Houston of the most intelligible and interesting parts of that conversation. And maybe we could just read a couple of them to you now, because they were quite fascinating. Cernan's very first words, as soon as the hatch opened and he stuck his head out, he said, "Gee, it's wild out here. I have 1 foot out, and I'm going to try to get the S-12 now." That's the experiment with the micrometeorites. And then a little later we heard him say, or they heard him in Houston clearly say, pull me down some more. That was a word to Stafford, either to pull him down by the umbilical cord or to pull him down with his feet. I don't know whether he was already outside the spacecraft at that time or not. He said, I'm very comfortable at one point. Again, he noted, it's a strange world out here, you know it? And then he said he was getting around all right. It's hard to get at these things, he noted at one time when he was trying to reach the handrail. He said, I don't see anything waving off the adapter here. And that was a reference when he's looking aft on the spaceship to the lines that have been found in other spacecraft in the past. He said, it's beautiful up here as he passed over California. Beautiful spacecraft as he floated out a little way. He said he saw Edwards Air Force Base quite clearly, and there are the islands, there's Baja California, he said. Then he noticed a tendency to float upward from the spacecraft, which had been noted by Ed White and Leonov before him. Then he got back to the adapter, and then it got to be all work, no play, with the problem of getting into that AMU, which he was unable to do, and with his visor fogging up, there was a lot of problem, and he had to come back without using the automatic maneuvering unit. CBS News, of course, will be standing by for further space alerts as developments warrant, leading up to this splashdown scheduled for 10:06 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News Space Center in St. Louis.